Welcome to our podcast. As parents, we all want our children to grow up healthy and strong, ready to tackle the world head on. However, raising a highly sensitive child, particularly a teenage boy, can present unique challenges that may leave you feeling overwhelmed and unsure of the best approach. If you feel this way, then this podcast is for you. Our goal with this podcast season is to help you understand the concept of high sensitivity in teens, recognize it in your child, and how to nurture their resilience. Please remember that this podcast is not a replacement for therapy and to always seek out a mental health professional for your particular situation. I'm Tiffany Herlin, a licensed clinical social worker, and today we have a rather unique podcast where we will be interviewing two experts on this topic from Discovery Ranch, a residential program for teenage boys. Today, I'm excited to first be interviewing Matt Childs, the clinical director at Discovery Ranch. Welcome, Matt. Start by first telling us a little bit about yourself and your role at Discovery Ranch.
Well, first of all, it's good to be here. Thanks for this opportunity. I appreciate it. So I'm an LCSW, and I've been working with youth for about 26 years now, which is crazy to think that that time is
makes you old.
Makes you feel really old to say that, but. Just something that really been drawn to working with this population, and maybe if I could just really quickly, when I had just a really unique experience when I was very young. I was in ninth grade, and I had a basketball coach that I had just a lot of respect for, and this would never happen today. But so he asked me if I would teach. Back then, we called it a resource class. So there were 8 students in the class. And so I was asked to teach reading skills and then social skills, and then we would do like a physical education piece after. And so, I was the same age as those kids, and it seemed pretty overwhelming initially.
Yeah.
But it turned out to be such a great experience, and really was really hooked at that point. And so that's
you knew from a young age that this was your goal in life.
Really what I wanted to do.
Awesome.
So I feel really fortunate to be able to do what I feel so passionate about.
Yeah, not a lot of people have that experience knowing from a young age. I kind of had something similar where, I just knew from high school, I wanted to work with people and talk to them and help them. So that's awesome. And how long have you been at Discovery Ranch?
So actually from the very beginning. So I was the first therapist. That's my claim to fame, is that I was the first therapist hired there. So
that's awesome.
We're coming up on 19 years.
Okay. So you got a lot of experience, expertise. Awesome. I'm excited to be talking to you about this. In this particular episode, we're going to be talking about a highly sensitive child, which is, it's not something you're going to find in the DSM-5 or something that we officially diagnose, but yet it's a really hot topic. So what does it mean when a teen has heightened sensitivity?
That's a great question. So, it's kind of self-explanatory, but it's more complicated than just the name. So, what we're seeing is that we have teens that when they get to us, they experience the world a little bit different, and so the highs are emotionally higher and the lows are lower. And so there's really a range there.
So there's a dramatic shift.
Yeah, there really is.
Yeah.
And they pick up on really subtle cues. They read into experiences maybe more than what most people would. And so the world can become a very overwhelming place for them.
Yeah, you hit it right on the head. I mean, I'll share with you what I've learned after researching this topic, because it's actually a newer topic for me. Like you said, it's self-explanatory, yet diving deeper into it, I've learned a highly sensitive person, HSP, it was a term coined by psychologist Elaine Aron. According to Aron's theory, HSPs are a subject of population who are high in a personality trait known as sensory processing sensitivity, or SPS. Those with high levels of SPS display increased emotional sensitivity, like you said, stronger reactivity to both external and internal stimuli, pain, hunger, light, and noise, and a complex inner life. So, I mean, you definitely hit it right on the head of what exactly it is. So, yeah, these people who are struggling with this feel easily overwhelmed. Like you said, pick up on reading those facial expressions, better than others, but yet often need time to get away from it all. and recharge and relax, and can feel quite drained from an experience. So if you're a parent listening, you're probably tuning in because you are, dealing with a child who's highly sensitive and you're overwhelmed by it yourself, or maybe you yourself are highly sensitive, right?
Right. It's not uncommon.
Really quick, I just wanted to dive into some statistics that I also found that overall, about 15 to 20% of the population are thought to be highly sensitive. People who come to therapy are actually closer to 50% highly sensitive people. So half of our clients that we're working with are highly sensitive people.
Right.
Yeah. What does it look like when a teen is over attuned to emotions and themselves and others?
What we're seeing is that, again, a situation will arise. There will be an experience, and as we look at it, we would think that a normal response would be kind of in this range, and the response that we're seeing is well beyond what that normal range would be. And again, it has everything to do with kind of experiencing the world in a more heightened sense.
It's like you get the volume turned up to 10 versus maybe the average of 5 to 7.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What does it look like when a teen is overtuned to social and relationship dynamics?
Well, so what we see is that there will be some sort of, for example, some sort of feedback that, the student will receive some sort of feedback.
Yeah.
And they're just going to take that to heart. They're going to see that as
more
some sort of a knock on them. They'll hang on to it for a long time. It becomes very painful for them.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I can think of a lot of people I've worked with, and even family members, and friends who are experiencing this.
Right.
What does it look like when a teen is overtuned to internal and external physical stimulus?
We'll just see just a heightened sense of just reactivity. I think that you mentioned a few of those. You talked about light and sound, and just it'll often happen in crowds. We'll see that a lot. That just because there's a lot taking place, and they're taking in so much stimuli that once again it becomes overwhelming for them.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think it's important to note to our listeners that a lot of times this could reflect someone who's on the spectrum, but it doesn't necessarily have to be someone who's on the spectrum. You can be highly sensitive and not be neurodiverse or autistic spectrum disorder. It can fall on a variety of people who are struggling with this.
Yeah, well stated. And we see that spectrum. We work with neurodiverse
That's right.
students, and we work with neurotypical kids as well. But they still have that heightened sensitivity.
Yeah. What are contributing factors to highly sensitive people?
Well, that's hotly debated. Actually,
let's talk
Tiffany.
about
it. So, just the nature versus nurture, and so we have students that have just from a developmental standpoint, they have experienced traumas, and so as a result of those experiences, they become very sensitive to the world around them, almost out of necessity, because they are working to keep themselves safe, and so as a result, they kind of have their head on a swivel. They're trying to read the people around them. They're trying to read the situations around them, and so that that can be one of the contributing factors. Then there's some compelling research that is stating that some of these kids are just coming into the world with that heightened sensitivity.
Maybe kids who are neurodiverse.
Yeah.
That's just how their brain processes things,
Right.
and they're wired. Well, that makes a lot of sense.
Right. Well, I would say again that any parent who has more than one child, they'll many of them will tell you this particular son or daughter just came into the world and just behaved this way. And then one other, Tiffany, one other piece of the research field that is really interesting is epigenetics. Okay. And they're talking about, that some of these mothers are just genetically, they're passing some of this along, and it's, it makes sense from a developmental standpoint that and again, we're just starting to understand this a little bit better now, that they are trying to genetically load their child for maybe an unsafe world. And so there's
passed down. Yeah, interesting. That's really fascinating. Yeah. And I think too, there's a piece of sometimes if you have a highly sensitive parent, they may also teach those traits onto their kids as well. So it's again that kind of nature versus nurture debate. Where does it come from?
Right. And I think that we need to talk about just really briefly is that the goal is to be safe. Right. And so that's what we all want is to feel safe. And so that as a result, then we end up doing things to help promote that that feeling of safety. And parents, they're trying to keep their kids safe.
Yep.
We deal with a lot of just fantastic parents that are doing their best to help assist their kids, and sometimes they love their kids too much, and sometimes it gets in the way.
We like to call it enabling, right?
Loving too much sounds better.
It does. It does. That's a nicer way to put it. Clint and I will talk more about that too in upcoming episodes. But I mean, I think you bring up a good point. A lot of times, these highly sensitive children have a dysregulated nervous system, whether it's from trauma or genetically how they're wired. How they were raised. So they're going to have a hard time being in a parasympathetic nervous system state where they're, in rest and digest, and they're, often in a hyperarousal state. And so we'll talk more about this later. I have some questions about how do we help them recognize those triggers and help regulate their nervous system. Is going to be a big one for them.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah. And like you said, we talked about anxious attachment. If they're struggling to feel safe in a relationship, let alone their environment, they're going to, have a really hard time with feeling extra heightened sensitivity. And we talked about neurodivergence. And then ultimately, they just have a low resilience or low, I want to say frustration tolerance would probably be another way to say that.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
And really, I mean, if we look just from a societal standpoint, there's so much that's taking place right now that does not help individuals that are dealing with these challenges.
Well, if they live through 2020, then I feel like we're all going to be a little heightened sensitivity, right? I mean, because we lived in a state that was of alarm, and there's this perceived threat, but we could never see it, Right. And so I think especially kids who grew up during that time period are maybe going to have a more heightened sensitivity than normal kids.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, that's a good point.
Social isolation that's taking place now, everything that's happening with technology and to the further isolation. These are things that continue to create additional stressors.
Yeah, it feeds into that anxious attachment, which is fascinating because kids now have these electronics in their hands and in their pockets, which connects them to everybody. But yet, kids will report they feel more alone and more anxious than ever.
Absolutely, more disconnected all the time.
And why is that? Do you think?
I think that there's not a substitute for the actual connection that takes place. We were just talking about it. When I'm much older than you, Tiffany, but we used to play night games, and we would organize. And
I did too, by the way.
And who's on what team, and we would do all of those things together, and we would have the opportunity to negotiate our world from a much younger age. And when's the last time you heard about kids being able to go out and play night games? Like they don't get to do that. And so it's just, again, that's just part of that further isolation that's taking place.
Or just going out, and playing and not knowing where your kid is for the next couple hours. Like right. I'm guilty of that. I'm like, okay, where are you going? Who are you going to be with? Like, let me know when you get there,
Absolutely.
And so it's such a different world that we live in. So interesting enough, I feel like there's benefits to being highly sensitive. It's not all a negative thing to be highly sensitive. Right. Let's talk about some of those benefits. What do you think are some of the benefits?
I think about some of the kids that I've worked with, some of the students that I've worked with, and I think that these are. It's not uncommon for them to be the most empathic individuals that you'll ever meet. Like they're feeling their own feelings, and they are they're really attuned to how someone else is feeling, and if they have the proper coping skills to be able to do that, then that's a beautiful thing to be able to empathize with someone and be happy for their success and be able to be sad with them. The world needs more of those people.
Absolutely.
Again, if we can keep them, in that range wherein they can function in a productive way, and really, kind of blanket statement. These are very creative individuals. These are the individuals that are able to share, talents maybe on a deeper level, or to experience the world in a deeper way. And the world, it can be a very bright and beautiful place if they can, continue to regulate in a pro-social way.
Yeah, and be able to thrive in their environment. Yeah. Rather than being overwhelmed. I think they make some of the best leaders and managers because they have the empathy piece that maybe other people are lacking. Being able to see what people under them who that they're working with may feel and are experiencing and struggling with.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well stated.
Yeah. Oftentimes they really enjoy spending time in nature and really find, beauty in the natural world as well. Kind of an interesting side piece as well as I was researching this. What are the struggles of highly sensitive teens when they don't have the proper coping skills to manage their sensitivity?
I just keep saying the same thing. They're overwhelmed, right? And so, and if I could, I at the risk of getting us off track,
go for it.
I think the word trauma is used a lot, right? And so we hear it a lot, and I think in many ways, we're using it too much, and in many ways, we're not using enough. And so, in talking with the students that we work with, and sometimes we'll be in a group setting, and we'll have two boys sitting next to each other, and one boy will be talking about his experience wherein he was in a car accident and lost a parent, and he's sitting next to a student who was called up in the front of the class to perform to complete a math problem on the board, and did something wrong, and the class laughed at him, and so he's like, he's really reluctant sometimes to say, well, my experience is not the same as his experience. But we have a saying, and that is that if the system, trauma by definition is the overwhelming of the system. Anything that overwhelms the system is considered to be trauma. Yeah. And so one of the examples.
It's a good definition. I like that.
Yeah. One of the examples that we talk to the kids about is that they seem to relate well, and they refer back to it, is that if they have, pretend like you have a laptop. It's this wonderful laptop is brand new, and you take it and you throw it in the ocean. What happens to it? It
doesn't work anymore.
It's fried. But we talk about let's say that you take that same laptop out, and it's in a little bit just of a rainstorm, and there's enough rain that the system is fried. Yeah. The fried, we talk about fried is fried.
Yeah. Well, there's big T and there's little t, but at the same time, you're still dysregulating the nervous system. Yeah, exactly. Is what's happening.
And so again, based on, it doesn't, whatever that experience is, it overwhelmed the system. Yeah. And these sensitive kids are just very prone to having experiences like that, where the system is overloaded.
What are some of the best things you can do to help highly sensitive children?
I think that a couple of things. One is that you teaching coping skills is critical, because again, there is that desire to be back in that place of safety and security, and so if we can teach them ways to do that are not that are not counterproductive, or that don't come with a lot of baggage, then it's going to be helpful for them. And I will say that these children or these people that are highly sensitive are really at risk for other very unproductive coping strategies. So they're trying to survive, and so addiction to gaming, and addiction to substances or pornography. So when that system is overwhelmed,
they're self-soothing at that point.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That makes sense.
And so if we can help them with teaching them coping strategies that aren't going to come with all that baggage, that's going to be very helpful. Another thing that I think is really helpful is working with parents and working with them to help them to better understand how they can respond.
Oh, that's huge.
And so I think that sometimes in our desire to kind of help and toughen our kids up, then don't be a crybaby, or don't just toughen up, or just pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And that's not always the best.
Or they're they're that helicopter parent was the other extreme as well, where they're enabling and trying to protect their kid from feeling everything, which is only going to hurt rather than help.
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, so we were talking about really well-meaning parents that are, they're either, pushing too hard or they're protecting too much.
Yeah.
And so we want to help caregivers and, of course, the students to strike that balance. We want them to be able to navigate the world in a meaningful way, and have the coping skills in place, and have the support system in place to allow them to do that.
Well, and ultimately have a secure attachment with their parent, so that, which allows the safety and helps the nervous system to regulate. And I think ultimately help them build resilience.
Very much
is going to be a big key. A couple other things, I'm thinking of too, like you said, helping them be able to cope through things like meditation, which is one way to help them regulate their nervous system when they're feeling overwhelmed, to find that inner place of peace. The other thing is teaching them how to learn to feel their emotions.
Yeah.
Not just avoid them, and then learn how to navigate those difficult emotions that come up, right?
Right.
Go ahead.
Well, well stated. I think that one of the things that we see with these kids that are highly sensitive, because they find themselves being overwhelmed, they start to detach from their feelings, and so they really start to distance themselves from that, and we see it with teenage boys especially, that they might be feeling a myriad of feelings, and that typically will funnel down into one emotion, and that is anger, right? So that's the socially acceptable thing, is for a teenage boy to be angry. And so all these kind of complicated things that are happening in their world funnel down to that anger. Yeah. And then they start to really distance themselves from those feelings. Yeah. And so disassociation is a big word, but really that's what's taking place with them. It's they figure out ways to separate or create distance.
It's easier to numb out all the emotions, but when you do that, you numb out the good ones too.
Very much so.
Which leads me to lastly, really teaching them compassion. I mean, when you live in a highly sensitive world, or you have a heightened sensitivity to the world, is more what I'm trying to say. Being gracious to yourself. It's okay that you needed a break. It's okay that maybe you reacted strongly to that, and giving yourself grace and compassion that you'd give to others that is so hard to give to ourselves. Yeah. So.
Absolutely. Well, I just coincidentally, I was just speaking with a former student. He's been home. He's doing very well. He's at college right now. He felt himself slipping. Okay. And so he called, and we just kind of touched base, and I just asked him the question. I said to him, what would you tell, your good friend who's experiencing what you are experiencing now? And he said, I know. He said, I would tell them to be kinder to themselves. And I just said, can you tell yourself to be kinder? I mean, can you say to yourself, I need to be kinder to myself? And he said, I can, and I will. So it was pretty cool. It's
crazy. I've been working really hard in my own personal life to teach people in the mental health, as a mental health professional, these exact skills, because I think everyone could use them. Absolutely. Helping to feel safe and secure, and recognizing when your nervous system's off, and then showing yourself self-compassion. And as I even work with adults doing this concept, it's hard. I've had a lot of adults, be like, I can't tell myself that, but I'm like, well, can you tell your friend that? Pretend. I said, great, let's start there. Like you were just saying, it's such powerful stuff, though, and everyone should have knowledge of these types of coping skills, but they're going to especially be helpful for someone who has a heightened sensitivity.
Well stated.
Matt, let's end with this question. If you had a parent call you up and said, I have a teenage son who's really highly sensitive, and I am really struggling with him, what message would you want to give them?
Probably what I would say is that who's the target in the home, right? Because it's not uncommon for a highly sensitive teen to be able to kind of navigate, for, the first few years, and then, kind of get to that teenage spot. And then it's not uncommon for me to have, mothers say, hey, I had a really great relationship with my son, and I recognize that he's highly sensitive. And then all of a sudden I've become the target of all this anger. I can't tell you the number of times that that's happened, Tiffany. Just that all of a sudden that the relationship changes and
the disconnect.
The disconnect, and then all of a sudden that caregiver, that primary caregiver, becomes a target of this anger. And so what I would say to that person is I would say a few things. One is that you're not alone. That we have a number of parents that are struggling with something very similar to what you're struggling with. I would also I would hope that I would be able to send a message of hope that things can get better, and that we would do some of the things that we've talked about earlier. That we have the ability to teach more effective coping strategies. That we would be able to help them as parents be able to support them a little bit better and again more effectively. And so that would be the message, is that I believe truly that things can get better.
Well, I think we're going to be talking about that in a couple episodes again with you, about how can we build resilience and really a secure attachment with a highly sensitive teen who maybe is more anxious attachment.
Excellent.
So I'm looking forward to hearing and talking about that. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. In our next following episode, stay tuned, because we're going to be meeting with Clinton Dorney, the Executive Director of Discovery Ranch, to talk about how to build resilience in highly sensitive kids. So stay tuned.